seconds after this was to start. So yeah,
Yeah,
so about
absolutely.
2 minutes. Okay, looks like everyone is here and it is 7:02 p.m. So I will call this meeting to order. This is a work session. It's an informal meeting. We're here to discuss and evaluate ideas and hash things out and not to vote on anything. And so we tend to be a little bit more informal at these work sessions than at the legislative sessions like we will have next week. So with that, we have an agenda before us. And does anyone have any changes to the agenda, any amendments? And does anyone have any conflicts of interest that they need to state up front about any agenda items?
I'm fine.
Okay. Well, let's move on down the agenda then. And the first item on the agenda and up on our screens now is a presentation from the Prince George's County Stormwater Management Project. So please let us know what's up.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I'd like to introduce myself. I know many of us have worked together. Charles Griffith, I'm with Prince George's County, the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance. Along with me tonight is Irv Becker, the Chief of the Highway and Bridge Design Division. So, of course, we're here on behalf of County Exec Halsell Brooks and our Acting Director, Martin Harris. I don't know, Mayor Thompson, will Councilmember Glaros be joining us on this evening? I wasn't sure. I know she asked.
I'm not sure. She said she was going to try to, but I'm not sure what's happened today.
Okay.
I haven't heard from her today.
Okay, sounds good. And we are here to update you on the ongoing maintenance efforts and, of course, the capital improvement project, which Irv will go into a further discussion on. Next slide, Irv. We'll cover brief introductions. There was a request. I'm not sure what other additional information is needed, but just want you guys to know the county's happy to provide any information regarding that September 10th storm as well. As always, I might not have any answers tonight, but I can refer back any additional questions you guys have. And then the maintenance activity, which is occurring through my office, the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance. We've had a lot of good work down there, I think, and I can give you a little update on that. And then what you guys are all here for, of course, is the Wells Run Capital Improvement Project, the bigger main event. This is just some of the information that was previously shared from our past presentation to various municipalities along that September 10th, 2020 storm, which I know we're all intimately familiar with. Next slide, Irv. So I want to talk a bit more about our maintenance effort. You guys, I'm sure, saw plenty of equipment coming through the sections of the channel, 49th to Ravenswood, Ravenswood to Lafayette, and then our work up along a couple industrial sites, AMG, Motorsports, and we're continuing our work, and there is additional work planned. We did have a lot of tree removals, which we're cognizant of. We have reached out to our Right Tree, Right Place program, Wayne Lucas, and he did mention that there's a nonprofit CCAR working in the area too. So we do believe we can actually get some additional plantings in through the town to help mitigate some of that potential canopy loss. Obviously, the big concern is, as you can see from some of these older pictures up top, those trees that were falling down and breaking off and blocking up our culverts. And I am very happy to tell you guys, we should have that new fence up. If you see that top right corner, our fence company is probably going to be working in the next couple of weeks to replace quite a few fence segments along there. And then last, there are a few hard to reach trees in certain segments. Just past Tuckerman, you know, there's a couple of trees growing out of the vertical channel that we aren't able to access without some special equipment to get down into the channel. So we're still programming that maintenance. You know, we didn't miss those. We just weren't able to access them with the equipment we had on hand. So that will be hopefully completed in this fiscal year. And with that, that's the update on the maintenance, and I'm going to turn it over to Irv to get into the bulk of the presentation.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. As Charlie indicated, I'm Irv Beckert. I'm Chief for Highway and Bridge Design Division here at TPW&T. Thanks for inviting me and our team to this meeting. So my division recently took over project management for this channel project. So I'll give you a little bit about it. The project is broken into two phases. Phase one, which is comprised of drainage improvements along the surrounding roadways that discharge to Wells Run between Beechwood Road, I'll zoom in on that, between Beechwood Road and US 1, Baltimore Avenue. The concrete channel rehabilitation is broken into two segments, and that is between Baltimore Avenue and 46th Avenue. That's about 800 linear feet. And again, another segment between Ravenswood and 49th Avenue, a little under 800 linear feet for that segment. Now, phase two is related to a natural channel establishment, taking the old concrete line channel and converting it to a more naturalized channel. And there are two segments for that as well. So the first segment is between 46th Avenue and 47th Street, up 47th Avenue. And the other section is between, the first section is between Ravenswood and 49th Avenue. And the second segment is after the railroad tracks, after Lafayette Avenue, between Sheridan Street and Ravenswood. So it's in the red here, section 2 and section 1 up here by 7th Avenue. And please let me know if you are having any problems seeing or hearing. Ryan, can you hear me okay? I just want to do a quick mic check.
I can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Very good. Moving on. So phase one is broken down into channel rehabilitation and some drainage improvements. Our drainage improvements involve simple curb cuts within the roadway areas to provide drainage relief for these smaller event storms when the channel's not at capacity. So shown here are segments of Wells Parkway. So again, very, very simple ideas here, just providing drainage relief. So we'll be studying and providing those final details very, very shortly over the next few months. The more substantial element of phase one is the channel rehabilitation, and that involves the details developed in the phase one engineering plans. And I'm just sharing with you a detail here to give you a flavor of what we're proposing and going to be implementing through the work of one of our contractors. So phase one, the next steps related to this, of course, we're going to continue the ongoing maintenance work that Charlie described. We will be in short order completing the drainage improvements engineering, just identifying where those curb cuts need to be, making sure we have safe and legal conveyance. And then we'll just submit our final design plans for the concrete channel rehabilitation to our procurement team. At that point, we'll procure the construction services and go to construction. We expect that we'll have the drainage improvements and the channel rehabilitation under construction in the upcoming fiscal year 23. Now, phase two is quite a bit more involved. Phase two involves the conversion of these concrete trapezoidal channels to a more natural channel. What you're seeing in this one slide here is part one, the first part of this, this phase two. And this is between, you can see the map image here around 46th Avenue, Sheridan Street, and the segment in question. Here's a simpler graphic to give you an idea of where this channel that will be reconstructed and naturalized is located. Again, it's the red segment that we've drawn in here between 46th Avenue running across towards Sheridan Street. And then here's an aerial view to give you context for where this channel is. The second part of phase two is the result of some very good collaboration with our partners at Park and Planning earlier this year, where we've added this excellent piece to the project. This is an overall view of the second segment area. And as you can see, the railroad tracks are along here, along and parallel to Rhode Island Avenue and Lafayette Avenue. The area in question is this green space here, and I'll show another image to give it context. So this is Lafayette Avenue and Ravenswood Street. So this green space here, which is controlled by Park and Planning, is the second piece that we've added to this recently. And again, very, very grateful to our partners at Park and Planning for suggesting this. We'll be engineering this and working with them on this. But that work is just starting. And this is an aerial view of that very same area to give you some context with the aerial imagery. Well, this is what it looks like today. These are those segments that we're going to be naturalizing, really completely reconfiguring. And the intent is, and these are your standard engineered trapezoidal concrete channels. The intention is to make it look something more like this. These are some sample photos of various elements that we would introduce into a naturalized channel. Riffle pools, the imbricated rock wall, excuse me, and then just really a conveyance system which is not following a straight line. It really is intended to convey water in a natural fashion, and the reason we're able to do that here is because those two areas that I showed you, they have a bit of space. They very rarely do you get this opportunity where you have actual room to widen your channel in a developed area. So we will be widening the channel. We will, in a marginal way, be adding channel capacity, not in a significant way, but that additional capacity will reduce the peak flows and will produce a modicum, just a small amount of flood control. I don't want to make promises that we can't deliver, but it will at least provide a small improvement in the peak flow discharge. And we'll be able to get a better idea of what exactly that amount of reduction is as we finalize our design. So another outstanding benefit to phase two is the creation of habitat. We are going to use native plantings. That environment that we're creating, it's a real environmental habitat for wildlife that we're establishing here. We're sustaining the creatures that are the pollinators that we so desperately need to sustain this environmental system that's being put in place, and to support the area around it. Again, so rarely do you have opportunities to do this, so we have a chance to do that here. And then finally, it always needs to be put in context. This is a flood control system after all. So the Wells Run drainage area, we are studying this extensively because we're about to modify the drainage characteristics of this channel. And in order to do that in such a way that we know that we're not impacting in a negative way any of the surrounding residents, businesses, government entities, we want to make darn sure that flood control needs are being met. So the actual channel segment that's being rehabilitated is actually just this yellow area here. However, in order to do that, to even consider any rehabilitation along this area, you need to study everything of significance and consequence upstream of it. So we have these enormous study areas that we are required to analyze and then provide a floodplain analysis that gets reviewed by the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement. So that's currently under review. We're going to be developing a proposed model for phase 2 once we have the parameters of the design clearly established. So what are our next steps in phase 2? Floodplain review, which I described, it's rather extensive. So we'll still need our approval of the existing model, which is currently under review by DPI. We will need to develop our proposed model within the direct project limits. And in all likelihood, we'll have to submit a LOMAR, which is a letter of map revision, to FEMA. All of these take an extensive amount of time. Our design. Currently, we're coordinating our design with Park and Planning and the other property owners to arrive at a final scope of improvements that respects their rights, that still meets the mission statement of the project. We're currently at a 30% design level. And once the 30% design is complete, we go through various milestones in these designs. We go through a 65%, which is a semi-final, a 90% plan review, and then that final advertisement contract set development. All of those mean review by the stakeholders, mean further refinement of the design, but it really does result in an excellent design at the end of the day. Something that is sound from an engineering standpoint, maintainable, safe, meets the regulatory requirements, and is satisfactory to the citizens who have to live around this, and to the business owners that might be impacted. Right-of-way. There's always right-of-way impacts, and this one is no exception. This project is no exception. We'll have to secure a maintenance agreement with Park and Planning that will require approval by their topmost leadership. And we will need to complete our utility coordination, which means we need to get the approval of any utility within the footprint of the project. And then the environmental permitting. We'll need a site development concept approval, a fine grading permit approval from DPI, a sediment and erosion control plan approval from the Soil Conservation District. But probably the most challenging element of this phase 2 project is going to be the joint permit that we'll need with MDE and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This will almost certainly be our critical path on this project to getting us to advertisement. So those are the major steps. I always look to advertisement as as a huge milestone, because really at that point, the hard engineering and regulatory work is essentially complete. At that point, you advertise and the contractor can bid on it. The lowest, most responsive bidder then typically secures the bid, secures the contract. And at that point, construction can move forward. Construction, as long as the design took, the construction goes much more quickly. We expect the construction to take less than 1 year to do this work. So that's our update on phase 1 and phase 2 of the Riverdale Channel project. My cell phone is listed here. That's always the best way to reach me. I'm always willing to talk to citizens, stakeholders about the project. I'm happy to set one-on-one meetings where we can go into the project at greater detail, because I always feel that that's the best way to make sure that we're meeting the requester's need, that if somebody has a concern, that we take the time to go over every aspect of the design. Because these are challenging and complicated projects. They deserve their day in court, so to speak. And we want to make sure that we explain them thoroughly. So my number is, again, 240-508-9610. Charlie Griffith, my counterpart, the Associate Director at the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance. His team will be charged with the maintenance level efforts that are being described, that were described at the beginning of this. But everything else that was related to this project, you can certainly follow it with me directly. And I'm very happy to answer the question, or at least point you in the right direction. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the team at Riverdale Park. If you have
Hey, Irv.
Thank
I'm just
you.
going to jump in with 2 quick things. Oh, sorry, Mayor Thompson, as Irv finishes up. I saw the question in the chat. We'll definitely provide you guys the slide presentation. And then the other item, I did just want to note that this project, the design and construction are both funded, just so you guys know that the county has dedicated funding for the design and construction of this effort.
That's fantastic news. Okay, I see that Councilmember Foe has a question, but I'm going to rudely butt in front of him and ask a few questions myself, unless he yells at me too loud. So if you could please back up to the slide that has, yeah, that's the exact slide that I wanted to see. Okay, I will tell you, if you can zoom in on the area that has phase 1, phase 2 on it. Okay, that's great. So I have to say that that I was quite surprised to see this. This is not what I was expecting at all. And I'll tell you that the downstream piece of phase 2, and I verified this in PG Atlas during the presentation, that there's no park and planning property down there. There's a little bit of Prince George's County property, and there's a lot of private property in the downstream piece of the phase 2. And so my understanding of the phase 2 was that the upstream piece of it, the piece that's in the park, was going to be significantly expanded from just modest improvements to the channel. And so perhaps if you can, there's a photo that you had at some point that had the streets and the phases on it, and it was sort of zoomed in on that part. But there's a baseball diamond in there. That's perfect. Thank you. There's a baseball diamond. There's a large open field, and the thought that we had in the community is that that entire space could become a surge stormwater storage space. So there'd be a naturalized channel on the sort of southwest corner, and then on the rest of that area, then it would perhaps have large quantities of soil removed and have some slopes put in down from where the playground are and of course where the trolley trail is. And that that could store a lot of water because of course, where the trolley trail goes, where the train tracks are, those are both two pinch points. And that's where the water backs up. And that's where on September 10th, the water backed up and flooded this neighborhood, was from that underpass underneath the trolley trail. And so that's what I was expecting, and not that we were going to get naturalized channel on the other side of the railroad tracks. So just wanted to make that that comment, to get that out very quickly.
Yeah, Mayor Thompson, thank you. It just to clarify, between Lafayette and Ravenswood, M&T PPC had reached out to the county, letting us know that they were working on those property acquisition. As you mentioned, Prince George's County does own one of the parcels that channel runs through. So as we understand, those property acquisitions are moving forward, and between the county and M&T PPC, between Lafayette and Ravenswood will be fully owned by via the county and M&T PPC. So we are waiting on confirmation from M&T PPC. Laura Conley's been fantastic in giving us updates where that stands. So, and then the second piece, just jump in on that again, M&T PPC, or if you go back to the slide adjacent to the park, they have not agreed to let us expand into the park. They have agreed to let us, basically the two triangles to the south of the channel. They've given us full access everywhere to the south side of the channel. So as Irv mentioned in the presentation, we are able to, significantly change that and open that up. So there's, in essence, I don't want to use the word wetlands because that gives a false kind of low-lying floodplain, I guess is maybe a more accurate term for what that would look like. And
Okay, well, I spoke at a planning board hearing on parks last year and asked them to be flexible in this way. And I guess I'll go back and talk to them again and see if we can get a little bit more openness in that area. The other piece of the presentation that sort of jumped out at me was your discussion of enhancements on the upstream side, the drainage improvements in phase 1 on the upstream side. And I don't know exactly what the complaints from that neighborhood are that's not in Riverdale Park. My understanding is that the main complaint was from a person very close to Baltimore Avenue who, when the water backs up, it ends up in their basement and yard. And so of course they're not very happy about that. And not that there was water ponding on the streets. And it in fact seems that increasing drainage from the street into the channel is counterproductive to the work that's going on at Nine Pond and elsewhere that's trying to keep water out, to keep water on site in various places during storm events. So I was wondering if you could comment on that.
The intention is to actually deal with the very low volume of the smaller events. These are the nuisance type events. This is the channel itself. Its capacity is not at all impacted by this. That water in a curb cut that we're creating is only going to be effective for very small rain events. It's simply going to prevent ponding along the roadway, maybe provide some drainage relief for backyards or front yards where there's some low-lying sumps that just need some drainage. It's in no way going to affect the operation of a 10-year, a 50-year event, 100-year event. That water is overwhelming that curb cut at that point. It would flow exactly as it flowed. Okay. So it wouldn't. Those drainage improvements are minimal. They have no impact at all on the functionality of the channel.
Okay, that lowers my blood pressure a little bit. I appreciate your statement about that.
Mayor Thompson, I'll also go back and double check between our Office of Storm Drain Maintenance and Office of Highway Maintenance. We did have some complaints to that area, but we'll verify those a little closer. And again, you know, we certainly want to provide the best overall drainage system for everyone. So we'll take a look at that, Mayor Thompson.
Okay, thank you. Two more quick comments before I allow my other members of the council to weigh in and members of the public eventually. So one of them is that between the two segments of phase 2, which is more or less between the trolley trail and the tracks, there's no improvements at all shown. Is that, my memory is that there were definitely the fence issue, which you showed earlier. I remember that from walking the channel year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. But is the channel itself in better shape than my memory there and doesn't need a refurbishment?
Mayor Thompson, so right now we currently are looking between the two industrial properties at adding some bollards and some other preventative measures that we think that piece of channel is in sustainable shape, that the cost benefit of reconstructing that, as you know, it's a vertical channel through there. It is an incredibly expensive piece of work that would provide very little benefit.
Okay.
You know, as mentioned, it butts to industrial properties who have been just, you know, again, I want to, you know, particularly thank, you know, John and Ivy providing a lot of support to us during this maintenance effort. You know, I believe we were in the town working for the better part of five or 6 weeks. And, you know, both Ivy and John were very helpful with citizens. And so just want to acknowledge that too. But the two industrial properties worked well with us. We did approach them about adding some bollards and some other things that we think will help provide, you know, a better benefit overall.
Okay, so there will be a little bit of small upgrades in there. It's not that it'll be entirely left alone. It's just you're not going to do major channel
Correct,
improvements.
and that'll be done through the Office of Storm Drain Maintenance.
Okay, and then my last question, and I've mentioned to a few people that at my day job we have a major renovation project going on, and something that I've learned from that project is to think about the phases and what happens during all of those phases. And so something that I just want to draw your attention to at this time is that if phase 1 completes before phase 2 really gets going, then you're going to have some enhanced or improved capacity in phase 1, and at least upstream of the first part of phase 2, it will be dumping into not improved channel. And so that sort of seems like in those intermediate time period, if phase 1 is really built before phase 2, then there's going to be an increased chance of bad flooding events in that area, just because the phase 2 unimproved at that time channel won't be able to handle any increased input from the upstream phase 1.
And I think that's why, as part of phase 1, there's an ongoing maintenance effort and an assessment by Charlie's team. I'll let Charlie address that specifically, but Charlie, would you agree that that's really how we come to grapple with that issue?
You know, Mayor Thompson, good question, good point, and I'll make sure Irv and I fully have that addressed between phase 1 and phase 2.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, those are all of my questions. So now I will open it up to other members of the council. Councilmember Foe, who is now shrouded in darkness.
I'm sorry that I am. I'm not going inside either. It's beautiful out. Like it's beautiful. I just had a question potentially about the timeline. I don't know if I missed something or not. I know that you said potential or that we are in 2023 fiscal for phase one. Do you have any updates as to when we would be looking at phase two, the natural channel completion of the project, or the completion of the entire project?
Sure. So phase two, again, just because of the complexity involved, we're estimating 2 years to complete design.
Okay.
And that's 2 years from now. And then another year to build with some time to procure the services. Typically, you can estimate between 4 to 6 months to procure the contracting services when we advertise the work. So the total time frame from today to complete build out being, I think, conservative, adequately conservative, is 3.5 years. So that's, again, that's starting from today and to where the project is closed out.
Somewhere over 40 months, probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Foe, that sounds correct. But I just to add on to what Irv said, I think it's worth noting that we are in a use two stream. So the construction of that phase two would really occur in the July through January months.
Thank you very much.
Okay, our newest council member just sworn in this afternoon. Welcome, Mr. Smith, and saw your hand up. Please ask your questions.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, just using this town computer for the first time, so making sure. And as the mayor stated, I've been officially a councilman for all of about 2 hours now, so apologize if this has been covered in any previous conversations or anything. But if I'm a resident living in this phase two sort of area, the area around the Old Town Riverdale Park neighborhood, I'm like pointing at my screen at the channel, like you can see me pointing. What is the like, so what of that for for one of those residents in 3.5 years or 40 months? Once this is complete, we're gonna have a really pretty natural channel and everything in there, which is gonna be great. I hope some fish sneak in there. But if I'm living in that neighborhood, what does that do for my particular stormwater situation?
Yeah. Well, by its nature, and by the way, congratulations on being a council member for the first day. Good, well done. This project by itself is really much more an environmental project. So that the idea is that it provides the water quality treatment that, again, a lot of people maybe cannot grasp or understand. But we're hoping at least the aesthetic element of this is something people can appreciate. I live in Greenbelt, and there was a channel naturalization project done in my community, and it really is lovely. It improved the look and the feel of that stream valley. My wife and my kids, we walk that trail. I run that trail a lot, and it really adds to a quality of life, I think, because you don't see a concrete trapezoidal channel. You see a natural channel, something that looks far more natural. So I do think it aesthetically, it is very attractive. And again, the underlying benefits are something that they may not see, is the stormwater management quality control that you get out of this. Does that answer the question, council member?
I think it gives me a lot of really great information. Thank you for that. But I'm thinking more of like, and I know this isn't just like the only thing, there's the 9 Pond project and lots of other things that are going to impact and affect, improve our stormwater drainage issues. But I'm glad this project is coming. It looks really great. I'm excited for the natural channel. But am I hearing you correctly that like even for those annual storms, not the 100-year, 50-year storms, this might not provide a lot of noticeable changes for somebody that lives on like one of these 3 blocks here?
This will provide a marginal improvement in flood control because we are widening, expanding the channel capacity.
And I want to be clear, marginal improvement is good. That's great.
Yeah, and we are, and we're going to measure that. So I can't really tell you exactly
Right.
what that reduction is yet because we still have to finalize our design. But once, I would say within a few months, as we set the section, we can actually calculate what our pre versus post development flow rates are, and then we can get a good sense of what the quantitative impacts are. Again, I don't expect it's going to be a huge amount, but it will help.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I see Councilmember Lingua has his hand up. So Councilmember Lingua, you are next.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And my question is regarding this timeline that's being discussed and the eventual build out. And I understand that there's some acquisition that's needing to take place. And that's what I'm hearing here. Yet what my eyes have seen already is that there's a substantial area already cleared out from Lafayette over to in that part that's going to be, as you're saying, repurposed, naturalized. That section essentially coming over from Lafayette to 40 that runs behind those properties, then it's coming out around 48th Avenue in that area, and then going back behind Ravenswood. Again, yes, that red section right there, that's all been cleared out. And I've had folks who I know over there ask me, hey, what's going on? And I said, I told them I believe this was part of the renovation of the storm drain there. And they have concerns about in the ensuing period, as has been brought up earlier in other examples, you know, when it does rain, because what they were pointing out was that what vegetation was up there on top of the banks was doing something to catch the stormwater. So could you share with us how your department, along with Park and Planning, is planning to, what are you planning to do in the meantime until this is finally finished out about 3 years from now?
Charlie, I think you can probably best address that.
Yeah, absolutely, Councilmember Lingua. To answer that question, we were definitely cognizant and aware before we cleared any trees. You know, we looked at the hydrology, hydraulics. We understand what's going on in the channel. While I do certainly understand from a visual perspective, seeing that canopy loss would make it appear as if there's going to be significantly more flow in the channel. That's just not actually the case. That it's a very large drainage area. And I will fully say that we've already looked at some of those sections back through Ravenswood and Lafayette, 48th, 49th, and you can already see that understory kind of coming back in, which is fantastic. And that's what we want. You know, we want that smaller understory in and adjacent to the channel. You know, what we don't want are the large trees that are falling down, getting into the channel, blocking the culverts. So what we're looking at, again, from a long-term maintenance perspective, council member, is that, you know, our channel through this section, again, we're not going to be able to naturalize it from Ravenswood to 49th. With the homes present there, there's just not enough room to naturalize that segment, which I believe was a previous question over the last couple of years, if it was able to be naturalized the entire length. I think we've previously talked about that, but the understory, again, we fully expect it to return in a very quick manner. We are looking at it, we are monitoring it. If we feel we need to do anything in the interim, we certainly will. And I hope that answered the question. If not, feel free to follow up.
I believe it does, and I'll let the folks over there know that they can check out this segment, and I'll make sure I pass on contact information to them in case they do want to get in touch with me.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are there any more council questions, or shall we move on to see if there are members of the public who would like? I saw a few heads shake, so unless I see a hand go up, 3, 2, 1. Okay, are there any members of the public who would like to ask questions? Okay, sounds like we may have gotten to the end of our questions for this evening. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you, everyone coming out and speaking to us this evening and updating us on the status of the project. And I think we'll be communicating over the next several months to see how progress can be maintained. So thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you very
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Have a great evening, everybody, and just give me a call if you need any information on this project.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Let's take care.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson, and I'll provide our information in the chat as well.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, next on the agenda is my report, and I don't really have a report this evening. I had a very busy weekend with some family issues, and so nothing prepared, but I will take a little bit more time to welcome our newest council member, Richard Smith. Swore him in about 2 hours and 20 minutes ago, and so welcome, Mr. Smith. We are very, very pleased to have you, and very pleased. We look forward to working with you on many issues of mutual interest. So with that, let's move on to the town manager's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council, members of our community and the staff team. A few things this evening. We have been in contact with WSSC, reference the project over the Anacostia. So people may have seen large sandbags being placed in the river there. And that is to divert the water to allow for replacement work on a lateral sewer line. And so the project has been in the planning stages for many years, is what we have learned. And the WSSC is now working closely with the county. And while they are diverting the water so they can work, they will keep their large piece of equipment on site to move the sandbags. And should there be any significant rainfall predicted, and the county will work with WSSC on that, they will remove any diversion that they have. They have sandbags going in two directions, one running parallel down the center of the river, and then they will block off on the north side of the bridge, one half at a time. So it's the perpendicular sandbags that they would remove in the event of a storm. So the project manager, she is staying in regular contact with Ms. Lewis, Ryan, and myself. We received another update a few hours ago. And so my message is that we didn't know about the project beforehand, but after we did some outreach, they're sharing information, and we're going to keep a really close eye on it out of the concern that any water diversion could cause a pinch point should there be a significant amount of rain. The Longfellow Street project, I know that's one that's a high priority for all of us, especially for the mayor and council and the members of our community that live on Longfellow Street. We've made some progress, but then we hit some areas where it would be most accurately described as fits and starts. And so we are working now to coordinate a cross-departmental meeting to make sure that the various departments within Prince George's County are on the same page so we can get this project moving forward. And so Ms. Lewis and I, we talk about it daily. And when we spoke at about 5 o'clock today, we agreed that our next step is to get everyone back in the room, because it appears that some folks may have a different understanding of process than other folks in other departments. So we're working to get everyone on the same page. And then the last thing I have, sorry, I need to. Okay, needed to make sure that Rosa was going to be able to speak to this, and she just sent me a text that she can. We recently had 2 separate occasions where the actions of our police officers saved people's lives. And I'd like to take a moment and ask Rosa if she could briefly share some of those details with the mayor and council and the community. Rosa?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And welcome, Councilman Smith. So we had 2 incidents recently that involved our officers doing saving two lives, performing CPR. One of them also involved utilizing the AED, which everybody now has in their vehicles. The first incident was on September 14th during the overnight hours, where officers originally from Hyattsville City actually witnessed a driver driving at a very high rate of speed eastbound on East-West Highway. And as he was crossing over the railroad tracks at the base of the hill, he lost control. We found out later that he was FaceTiming his brother at the same time performing these acts. But anyway, he rolled his car several times and ultimately came to a stop at 4601 East-West Highway. Officer Saunders and another officer from Hyattsville City were able to extricate the driver from the car, immediately noticed that he was unresponsive, no pulse, so they started CPR. They were able to get a pulse, and a fireboard arrived pretty quickly and were able to transport him to University of Maryland Trauma Center. The other incident occurred recently on the 25th, while 2 of our officers were working part-time at the Alamo restaurant. They were flagged down that there was an unresponsive male in the alley there next to the Alamo. So they went around the corner. Sure enough, he had no pulse. So Officer Saunders immediately started CPR while Officer Spate went to go grab his AED from the vehicle. They applied the AED. They did several rounds with no pulse. The AED will tell you whether it will shock or whether just continue regular CPR. It advised to continue regular CPR. Ultimately, they were able to regain a pulse, and fireboard arrived and administered Narcan, which really brought him back. And then off they went to the hospital, where he ultimately also lived. So yes, 2 lives were saved by our officers, our on-duty officers. So they did a great job and are to be commended. Any questions?
That is fantastic news, Deputy Chief Twixens. Thank you for sharing those stories. It's really good to hear that. Appreciate it, and appreciate the heroic actions of our officers.
Thank you. I'll pass that along.
Thanks, Rosa. And then I have 2 other quick things. A reminder to the mayor and council. We have a meeting tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. It is intended or expected to be a closed meeting. It is to consult with staff and legal counsel about potential litigation. So that'll be a virtual meeting tomorrow night at 7. The last thing I have is to welcome the new Ward 1 Council Member Smith on behalf of the staff team. Welcome to the shared efforts to improve things in Riverdale Park. And I look forward to working with you. And if you need anything, just let us know. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Are there any questions for the Town Manager? Or can we move on to Council Committee and Ward reports? I can actually hear crickets out my open window. I'm enjoying the outdoors also. So move on to Council Committee and Ward reports, and I will put Mr. Smith on the spot. Mr. Smith, this is the time when council members can discuss what's going on in their ward, their plans, their activities. So feel free, but also you can feel free to skip this month or this meeting and pick up next week.
I'll take just a moment to thank you for all the congratulations that have come across as folks give their reports. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to working hard with all of you. Not a ton of breaking news in Ward 1 in the last 2 hours. So I think we're good there. I would say, I don't know if we've had a Ward 1 council person to acknowledge this since it happened, but Ward 1 Business 250 Barbecue, it has been named one of the best new barbecue restaurants in all of America by Southern Living magazine. Southern Living said that they are, this is the first time they have added a barbecue joint outside of the South to that list. So really excited and hope everyone is checking up on what's going on with all the business, local small business.
You're muted, sir.
Sorry, just hope everybody is doing a great job of checking out our small businesses in Riverdale Park and Ward 1. And that's all I'll have for right now.
Thank you. I'm certainly a big fan of 250 Texas. I'm so pleased we have them in town, as well as the many other small businesses we have that all contribute to my weight maintenance issues. So
It's fun having them and Federalist Pig a few blocks away from my house as well. So depending on which way the wind blows, we're getting different barbecue smells.
Fantastic. Okay, Councilmember Foe, Ward 2. Councilmember Foe, you are muted if you're speaking. Oh, he says he is unable to speak at this time. Can't unmute. Well, that's unfortunate. Maybe you should try restarting your machine and we can come back to you in a moment. But in the meantime, we'll move on to Councilmember Lingua, Ward 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And for my esteemed colleague from Ward 2, it's just a matter of taking your little index finger there and popping that little microphone thing. You're back in business. But no, you probably have something else going on, which is fine. Admire the guy. In case anyone knows, they're starting to get the kid onto solid food. So, and he said Mondays are tough. So I'll leave that at that. Welcome, Mr. Richard Smith, Councilman for Ward 1. Hope you enjoy doing this as much as we have over the years. And as has been said, if you want to chat or if there's anything you want to talk about, please feel free to get in touch with us. We're happy to talk things over. Absolutely so. And yes, I did see that article about Southern Living magazine, who I think they need to go back to cartography school because saying that Maryland is not part of the South, well, one could debate that. But being that they're saying that it's not part of the South, I'm sure then that that whichever way the wind blows, I'm sure you would see that it's going to blow you north, as opposed to any other direction. And I'm sure that you will be a true fan and patron of Texas 250 Barbecue in town. And I know the folks around there would love to see you around there as well. Other than that, I have nothing to report really at this time. That can wait for next week. I did want to thank Mr. Lustician for the report on Longfellow Street. This is something I asked for at the work session. I do appreciate that being part of the town manager's report. And I look forward to hearing more about the 48th Avenue sidewalk project.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua. We'll go next to Councilmember Sadiq, Ward 4, excuse me.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Councilmember Mejia contacted me and town staff last week. She has had a serious family issue. That's why she's been absent the last few meetings. And I'm willing to talk to members of the council offline. I believe that these absences should be excused, and we can take action to do so at the council meeting next week when we are actually able to vote. It's a definite very, very serious situation and very unfortunate. And as I said, I can talk to you offline about it. And that brings us to Councilmember Mayers, Ward 6.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have nothing to report at this time.
Thank you, Councilmember Mayers. So that brings us to public comments. Are there any public comments this evening?
Excuse me.
Oh, you're back.
Oh, look who
Councilmember-
returned.
Councilmember
You
Foe.
all set?
You can't rob me of my turn to speak.
Well,
Of
did
course,
you get
I
the new
didn't-
nappy on or what?
Something happened. I couldn't log in or I couldn't talk and I couldn't express any gratitude or anything like that. And I know a lot of people would probably be smiling because it would limit the meeting. I just, I wanted to say, I hope everybody's doing well. And I will save the majority of my presentation for next week. Welcome, Councilman. It's nice to have somebody in the seat again.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Foe. I apologize. I wasn't aware that you were back and able to speak. So. Okay, so open again for public comments if there are any. Hearing none, not seeing anyone unmuting themselves, we will move on to the work session discussion items. And the first item is the fiscal year 2022 revenue update.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, members of the public. Tonight's revenue report is a comparison report. Purpose is to show where the town is at for revenue and then to compare it to the 3 fiscal years that it preceded. The report is in the same format that we've been presenting at previous work sessions with the 5 major revenue categories: local taxes, licenses and permits, administrative fees, fines and forfeitures, and then the community programs. So for the current fiscal year, for local taxes, the town has received $1,014,854. For the current fiscal year, we are in a pretty good position. At this point in the previous fiscal year, the town had brought in $1,132,034. Majority of that difference comes from the personal property tax. The town had booked $286,000 last year for the Purple Line Transit, which was made up a major portion of the $526,000, which is the 4008 line item. But when we compare this current fiscal year and the previous fiscal year, we are up significantly for local taxes than we are for fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2019. The next major category is licenses and permits. Thus far, the town has booked $164,034. So for the current fiscal year, if we look at the 3 that preceded it, we're in the ballpark range of where we've landed at before. Last year, we were up at 177,000, but then the year before that, it was just 156. And then for fiscal year 2019, the town had booked 166,000. So, we're still in the same ballpark range that we've been in the previous years. The next major category is administrative fees. This section contains abatement charges and municipal infractions. Thus far, the town has booked $600. The previous year, it was $600 as well. Next major category is fines and forfeitures. This consists of the police reports, vehicle impounds, and parking citations. Thus far, the town has booked $5,950 for this category, which is down a bit from previous fiscal years. We've seen a lot of which we attribute to the pandemic and COVID. Last fiscal year, the town had received $8,345.54 at this point. next major category, which you'll see is up a bit. We actually, this contains Safe Speed for students, which is our speed camera revenue. So for the current fiscal year, the town has brought in $154,928, which is up significantly from previous fiscal years. We've added additional speed cameras, and with COVID, we've had less traffic and more speeding. So while fines and forfeitures are down in comparison, our speed camera revenue is actually up very high in comparison to previous fiscal years. So overall, we have a net operating income for these major categories of $1,347,367.56. When we look at the previous fiscal years, we are a little bit lower than where we were in the previous fiscal year. Again, we did book $286,000 last year for Purple Line Transit, which makes up the majority of the difference there. But overall, when we look at the current fiscal year and the previous fiscal year, we are up in comparison to fiscal year 2020 and 2019. So yes, that concludes the revenue comparison, and I will open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Are there any questions about the revenue report?
I have none.
Thank you, Councilmember Lingua. I'll assume that the lack of noise out of everyone else means that no one else has questions. I will say that I appreciate the detailed report and the explanation of the slight drop from last year. So, and I guess I have one question, which was whether at this time last year had we booked any income from the CARES Act, and did that come in to this? Would that have come into this revenue report?
So the CARES Act fund, that revenue was booked in the Economic Development Fund.
Okay, so wouldn't appear in this
Right.
report. Okay, thank you very much. So with no other questions from Mr. Jones, we can move on to the next item on the list, which is the 48th Avenue Sidewalk Project.
Ms. Lewis.
Sure. Thank you, and good evening, Mayor, council members, and welcome to Councilmember Smith. And good evening to members of the community and staff. No action is requested on this item this evening. Instead, I'm going to provide a briefing on 2 capital projects and the solicitation process underway to select a contractor to build these improvements. Starting with the 48th Avenue Sidewalk Project, I'm happy to announce that it's back on track for completion after a delay to comply with the requirements of the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program that's administered by Prince George's County. The town received $155,000 from the program and added $45,000 of capital improvement program funds for a project budget of $200,000. The project consists of the installation of a sidewalk on only the west side of 48th Avenue, starting mid-block between Riverdale Road and Oliver Street and extending to Nicholson. The scope of the project initially was much broader. However, given the limited budget, the obstructions on the east side of the road primarily, and the possibility of triggering costly stormwater requirements, the project was scaled back to consist of a sidewalk on the west side of the project between Riverdale Road or mid-block between Riverdale Road and Oliver and extending to Nicholson, whereas initially it was expected to extend to Longfellow Street. The project will also include a curb extension immediately south of Oglethorpe to save 2 mature trees a sidewalk alignment that avoids several existing stormwater inlets along this stretch of road and curb ramps, crosswalks, and stop bars at intersections. The project is estimated at $185,000, considering engineering and construction cost and the cost of removing 2 trees that were removed last year. You have within your staff report an image of the design. It's pretty straightforward. With the curb extension, the project will include the extension of 2 driveways. Those property owners have been notified. We had to remove trees that were in the pathway of the sidewalk. Any questions on that project before I talk about this Taylor Road curb and sidewalk project?
Director Lewis, I just want to make one clarifying comment, which is that, just to make sure everyone understands this, is that the sidewalk that only goes halfway between Riverdale and Oliver Street will actually create contiguous sidewalk there. There's actually sidewalk existing on the northern piece of that already. So we'll connect and have sidewalk all the way through. That's correct?
That is correct. And thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
It's
So
mid-block because of an existing sidewalk in half of that block.
good. Okay. Are there any questions for Director Lewis about this this part of the project?
Oh, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please.
Well, I was going to ask for an estimated completion date, but I know better, so I
Well,
won't.
Well, you can. We have an answer. So I was going to talk about the solicitation for a contract a little later. In that solicitation, we are requiring that the project is substantially completed within 30 days of a notice to proceed and totally completed 15 days after that. So about 45 days once we have an executed contract and notice to proceed.
Okay.
And if I could add on to that, Ms. Lewis, is it correct that we'll be bringing a recommendation to the council next week to authorize me to sign the contract?
Yes. I was going to speak to that after introducing the other project, but absolutely. And I can talk about where we are in that process after this.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I think, go ahead.
The second project is the Taylor Road curb and sidewalk project. It is a stormwater project with a key objective to prevent stormwater from flowing onto private property from the street. There is inexplicably a mountable curb. I have no background in why that is, but a mountable curb in front of 6409 and 6407 Taylor Road. The rest of the block has a standard height curb. The sidewalk and driveway apron and tree box, the area between the sidewalk and the curb, are sloped in the wrong direction, actually towards the front yard of 6409, so that stormwater flows onto the property and contributes to front yard flooding. The resident at 6407 has actually addressed the flooding situation with improvements on the property. So the town project is focused entirely on 6409 and involves the installation of a standard height curb at 6 inches and replacement of the sidewalk and driveway apron at the proper grades and regrading of the tree box to channel stormwater to the street and to keep stormwater from entering onto the property. The project budget is $220,000, including engineering and construction costs. Staff released an invitation to bid for construction services about 30 days ago for both projects, and we're delighted to receive bids from 11 contractors, all of whom bid on both projects. The bid amounts were pretty broad actually, range from $61,450 to $194,680 for the 48th Avenue project, and from $6,000, roughly $300 to $3,600 for the Taylor Road project. We're still in the process of reviewing the bid details. Each of the contractors were required to submit a cost breakdown, And we're continuing to wade through them to better understand the variations in the bid amounts and to arrive at a recommendation for a contractor to present to council for consideration. The recommended bidder and the draft contract will be presented to the council at the legislative meeting on October 4th. And with that, I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Are there questions about these projects?
Yes.
Councilmember Foe, please speak.
Yeah. So we don't know why the original curb was there, or the reason is the height that it is.
No one among the current staff has the background on why that is. James Davis, the operations manager in Public Works, probably has the longest tenure of those of us involved, and he has no recollection of why a mountable curb was just installed in front of those two properties along that entire block.
Yeah, I got an email from one of my constituents that is super happy about this, and I'll be getting one from one that isn't happy about this. This is what we're like. I feel strongly if this is what the engineers are telling us we have to do, then we have to do that, right?
Yeah. So again, we're only focusing on 6409. Because the
Yes.
adjacent property owner who doesn't support the program, is not interested in the project, rather on her property, has done extensive front yard work. She's installed up to 5 dry wells that collect the stormwater from not just the front of her property, but the rear of the property. A portion of the rear is channeled into the front of the property. So she's happy that she was able to resolve her situation on her property and doesn't want any work done that might reverse any of that. And we are accommodating that and addressing the needs at the other property.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any additional questions about either of these projects from council or public?
You have a hand up,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Councilmember Smith, please.
Yeah, just one quick question. If possible to speak to it. Do we know if any of the contractors that have bid are based in our town?
I don't believe any of them are based in town.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there any additional questions? I see Councilmember Smith's hand is still up, but I presume it's just there. So let's move on to item 3, work session discussion. Item 3, mandatory staff COVID-19 vaccination program.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As it is spelled out in the staff memo and the draft ordinance to change or to amend the town's personnel manual by adding a section to our workplace safety area. The edits will require vaccination. There will be the required exemptions for religious reasons or sincerely held religious reasons or for medical reasons. There will be a period of time that employees have to report vaccination status. Right now, we're saying at the end of the calendar year. And then if employees are not vaccinated by that time and have not received an exemption, they will then have, I believe it's 10 days to begin the process. We have this as a fit for duty requirement. And as such, it's not a disciplinary situation. If someone should not comply with the requirement, it's not governed by that section of the personnel manual, but rather it is a fit for duty situation. And if someone doesn't have an exemption or comply, then they would not be able to remain employed. There's a testing requirement for those that receive an exemption. And so for employees who receive an exemption, the town would cover the cost of that testing. In reviewing that provision, I know there are news stories where employers are putting testing requirements on the individual employees. From a process standpoint, I think that's not appropriate if the employee is granted an exemption. If they have a legitimate reason not to be subject to vaccination, then they should not have to incur additional costs because they have that legitimate reason. That's the basics of this. I will point out, I think all of us have seen the news articles. There was a federal court judge in New York who a number of days ago had issued an injunction to stop a vaccination program aimed at the teachers and school employees. And just about an hour or so ago, a panel of judges in New York have lifted that injunction, and that vaccination requirement is proceeding. So as I mentioned last week, and as it is in the memo to you all this evening, we're also continuing our discussions with the staff team. The members of my leadership team have bring this item up to their staff, and I bring it up every all staff meeting on Mondays, and we're having meetings this Thursday with staff just on this topic to answer questions and to receive any feedback. I know we have a few employees who are unvaccinated, and it's our hope that those employees, if they're not going to seek an exemption, that they become vaccinated. And with that, sir, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager. Are there questions for the town manager on this legislation?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please go ahead, Councilmember Lincoln.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lestitian, thank you for that briefing. I did have a question on the language in the draft document, the ordinance draft document, and it's section B, and the paragraph is very specific on the vaccination, and I know that it is that we're trying to address that issue now. Was there discussion about making it somewhat broader and more in general terms in case this needs to be referred to later on for, God forbid, but you never know, a different novel virus that could come around?
Yes. The short answer to your question, sir, is yes. There have been staff discussions, and Mr. Smith and I have discussed this with the town's attorney, Mr. Sussman. And the prevailing view is that let's set this up and deal with what we know. And should there be the next pandemic with a different virus and different vaccines, that the process would then have an established roadmap, if you will, and we would just come back to the council and say things have changed, and we're recommending this change to the policy. Whoever sits in my chair wields a lot of authority with this policy, and I think that it's best that if conditions change, that there be a conversation with the council and deliberative action by the council, and not have the town's manager expand a requirement because the language is vague enough to allow that person to do that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Siddiq, I see your hand is up. Please speak.
I'm a little bit uncertain as to why we would pay for their tests if they get an exemption.
From my perspective, if unlike policies that have a testing opt-out, where you can be vaccinated or tested, if the council decided on that type of a program, I would not recommend that the town pay for testing. But if someone holds a religious belief, or they have a medical condition that prohibits them from taking the vaccine, my personal opinion, my professional opinion is that the town should not then make them incur additional costs there. Right now, I'm unaware of any cost that would be added to testing. But if there were a cost, I think it would be de minimis. And that's just my opinion, though, sir.
Any additional questions for the town manager?
Can I ask a clarifying question, sir?
Of course.
Are there other members of the town council that would like to see that provision changed?
Regarding payment?
Yes, sir.
Personally, no. I'd rather, I think, you know, by offering to make payment, and it's a indirect way of just being able to keep track of making sure that testing is being done. I mean, I'm sure there's also other documentation you have in terms of, you know, providing paperwork saying that someone has been tested, and that they have to provide, you know, that paperwork. I just think it's just a second way of confirming that.
Councilmember Foe?
Can you hear me? I switched to my wife's earphones. Okay.
Yes.
No, I don't want to change that policy, but I want to protect us from species claims of religious exemption. That's it. You hear things, you read things, and I just want to make sure that we're not the target of that, and that our workplace remains as safe as possible. That's how I feel about this.
And what we can do, and Councilmember Siddiq, perhaps this will address your concerns. What we can do is track that, and if we find that we have a considerable expense, we can come back to the council and report what that expense is, and then the policy can always be amended at that time.
I'll just add as a comment that we do provide very good healthcare options to our staff, and so there should not be an enormous out-of-pocket cost. Even if the current policy of essentially free tests anytime you want them doesn't remain, then I believe that the out-of-pocket costs would still be relatively small.
The last comment I have, sir, on that point is the among the staff leadership team, we sometimes talk about removing arrows from quivers, and if this removes an arrow from a quiver, and we can have a smoother implementation of whatever the final product is that the mayor and council decide upon, then that may be worth a couple dollars.
Okay. Any additional council or public comments on this this proposed legislation? I hope that there will be a council member to introduce it next week. I assume that someone will be willing to do that. So we'll see it again next week and pass it perhaps fairly quickly. Okay, let's move on the agenda. There are no other questions. Next item, a very meaty ordinance, the ordinance 2021-OR-08 regarding amendment to the fiscal year 2022 budget related to the American Rescue Plan Act funds.
And I'm not sure who's taking the lead on this one.
Well, I'm happy to take the lead. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of staff and the public. The purpose of this amendment is so that the town is able to accept the American Rescue Plan Act funds and into our current operating budget for this fiscal year, and so that we are able to budget for that accordingly. So we've received quite a bit of funds. I believe it was early September when we received the first 50% of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. It was just over $3.2 million. And yes, so this will be an account established within the Economic Development Fund to keep track of this large influx of money from the American Rescue Plan Act, and as well as budgeting therefore. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Are there any council questions? Councilman Lingua.
Mr. Ryan, just, as a reminder for everybody, so that we're all on the same page, the deadlines that we need to be looking at in order to address, in order to make the most out of this money are December 2024 and December 2026. And I believe that December 2024 is to have the money, missing the term here, I want to say encumbered.
Yes,
and by 2026 to have the money expended and the projects. Now, does that include also the projects completed or the money expended, or both?
For the purposes of our programs, the programs will also be completed on that date, as the programs that we fund with these funds will
So they need to be
quite
completed by
substantial.
2026.
Yes.
Okay. So really in the space of things with this amount and with other areas getting monies like this, that's going to be coming a whole heck of a lot sooner than we're thinking. Is that your assessment?
Yes, this is a great deal of funds to go through in 3 to 5 years. Yes.
So the sooner we're able to identify, prioritize, and get these projects underway, the better off we're going to be towards completing them on schedule.
Yes, I'd say that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Director Shelton? Okay, let's move on to item 5, the permit parking program.
And Chief Morris or Assistant Chief Quixon?
Yeah, I'll take this one. Rosa can chime in if necessary. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, members of the public. There's no action required on this tonight. It's provided primarily for informational purposes for the mayor and council as a result of discussions that have that were generated at previous council meetings regarding permit parking and the number of permits, and in particular, certain roadways in the town that may be burdened by the number of permits that are issued in certain areas. Particularly mentioned was the Madison Hill area. So the purpose of this document is to provide information for the mayor and council in consideration of any policy changes that the mayor and council might want to seek as it relates to the parking permit to minimize the impact of the crowding on some of the more narrow roadways. There's additional documentation that's attached to this that's been provided by the contract engineer for the town to indicate the number of available spaces on the roadway. And we've also calculated what the number of permits would be if permits were issued in total to all of the homes that were eligible for those permits.
That concludes your report.
Here to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, very good. So just to go through the numbers, I can't get this document up on my screen right now. I have too many windows open, which happens to me all the time. But my memory is that on Silk Tree, there are a total of 76 spaces, possible spaces that are available. And we currently have 94 permits issued. Is that actually 94 permits issued, or is that 94 possible permits issued?
That's 94 for that area.
That have been issued.
That have been issued. And that
Okay.
number is actually, and Mr. Mayor, these numbers were based upon assessments about a week and a half ago. So that number is actually increased by just a few.
Okay. So we have too many permits out there is sort of the bottom line, because that's if you scroll down the map just a little bit, and there are a lot of spaces that are sort of near the stormwater facility or the playground, which I think most residents would find not as appealing as parking in front of their house. Most residents like to park directly in front of their house, of course. And so I've in fact, the times I visited the neighborhood, then I've seen empty spaces down there. And that means that the spaces away from there are even more in high demand and are almost certainly always filled, which is what I've seen also. So just wanted to clarify that. Are there other council questions on this presentation?
Yes.
I have one observation, if I may. And this is my recollection of Silk Tree Drive, and Councilmember Sadiq, do correct me if I'm in error here. A number of the homes there have pull-in garages, and I believe some of them have double bay pull-in garages. Are we aware of, are residents making full use of those garages as such, or have these garages become external storage areas or other uses?
Well, I don't think we can legislate what people do on their own private property. But they are definitely used for other things other than garage.
Well, if you're turning that garage into a living space and then you're pulling up a car in front of it, that's running foul of county code.
I wouldn't say living space, but definitely stuff other than cars is what I typically see when I walk by.
Okay, so really what this comes down to is folks choosing not to use their garage as a garage for their car, and they're using it for other purposes.
That's certainly one of the problems.
Okay. All right, thank you.
But the other issue, I think, is the Silk Tree gets very narrow. And even with the number of parking spots that are available, cars parked on either side result in a very narrow channel as you head down past like 5714 further into the cul-de-sac. It's going to be really tight if you have cars parked on both sides.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing the same. There's the same issue over on Nicholson Street, over where I'm at, the like up through the 4900 block of Nicholson. because cars are now parking on both sides. And the fire department uses that street as a training street for their trucks to come through, for their drivers to navigate with cars, with in such a tight confine. And that's an issue that I want to talk with residents over there about and see what we can come up with, because it's just something that is, it's got to be looked at. And I know with Silk Tree, that's on an incline. At least Nicholson's a flat street, is a level street. And that challenge of having that narrow space on an incline, heaven forbid, we should have an ice storm or anything. So,
Yeah, I've always been impressed at Christmas time when when Santa Claus comes down on a fire truck and squeezes through that area at night, which is full of parked cars. It just seems way too exciting. That's not a lot of clearance, even with a car.
Yeah. So I guess is the question here, is that the number of permit parking spaces to be made available, or do we go with less, or well, what are the thoughts on this from everyone?
So in the memo, it mentions that each residence can have 4 permits. And so perhaps that's something that we should look at amending.
So at one point we had a online, I believe, method for getting visitors spots. And if we went with a hard 2 per unit and then visitor spots as an exception basis, that would certainly reduce the number of permits given to certain houses.
And can staff answer the question of whether the current parking ordinance allows that in just this area as opposed to other areas in town? My memory is that it does.
Chief?
Yep. Mr. Mayor, the ordinance is consistent throughout the town. So recall that we had 17 permitted parking areas throughout the town. We reevaluated those parking areas a number of years ago and eliminated 6 of them. But the number of permits that are issued is consistent throughout the town, regardless of the particular area.
So at one point, the ordinance allowed each area to have a different number of permits per residence, I believe. And I think we might have removed that in the simplification that you discussed.
Yes, sir. So we could provide some consistency throughout the town.
Okay, so we may need to address that. Councilmember Smith, I see your hand is up. Would you like to speak to this?
Yes, sir. I'm just wondering, having looked at the materials, the 4 per residence number of permits. Is there anybody who could speak to the history of that, how that number was arrived at? Because it seems at first glance to me to be a bit excessive.
So I can answer that, Mr. Mayor. So the council member, the initial allowed for 2 parking permits and 2 guest permits, hence the 4. So for to provide greater consistency and to minimize the cost to the town, since they could get 2 and get 2 guest permits, we just went to the 4 permits. There's also a provision that allows for those exceptions where perhaps there's a funeral or a wedding or some sort of a special event, and the resident can come to the police station and get a 24-hour permit. So we would give up to 10 of those, depending upon the circumstances. so that they could allow their guests to be able to park. And that was on paper with it dated and timed, and our officers knew when the expiration of those would be. So, and I'm mindful also, just for the mayor and council's information, that we are into September, so this is a two-year permit program, and so we're 9 months in, almost 10 months into the first year. So we'd have another year to go before we would reissue permits under the current ordinance.
We have some time to work on this.
Are those permits individually numbered or anything like that? I'm wondering if there is a method by which, and I know this would take some figuring out to do, because I know your officers, chief, don't want to spend all their day writing down parking pass numbers. But if we could determine how many folks are using 4 parking passes on a regular basis, to see if that is something that is really necessary at all. Just a thought there.
Yeah, council member, I can't recall. I've seen them permits, but sitting here, I can't recall whether they're numbered or not. We do know exactly what homes have permits issued, what homes requested permits, and how many, whether they requested 1, 2, 3, or 4 permits. So we do have that information.
So the permits come by request. When I many years ago lived in DC, I know we just got 2 permits every year, or every other year, I think. Anyway, they send them to you automatically, whether you request them or not. Do we do that, or you have to actually proactively request them?
They have to request them and pay for the permits. There's a cost, there's an administrative fee associated with the program.
Okay, thank you.
And so part of the issue is that there are several houses that apparently have been converted into rentals. So there's a huge overabundance of cars there. So 2 in the driveway and 4 on the street. You do that a couple times and you get an awful lot of cars on the street. So if we could reduce it to 2 per house, and then for special occasions, you can request the visitor's passes, but no, in fact, visitor's passes that are out there. I think that would help a lot.
Okay, well, why don't we continue to discuss this? As Chief Morris said, we're, barely into, or maybe almost halfway into a 2-year program. So we have some time to work on this. And so why don't we continue these discussions and perhaps have some legislation in the winter or spring.
Mr. Mayor, I had one more question.
Yes.
If I may.
Sure.
Councilmember Sadiq, are the rentals in compliance with the HOA guidelines?
They are not, but we have no way to enforce it.
Ah, okay.
And if I may, the town has received a number of complaints about illegal conversions. We have worked to identify that, try to prove that properties have been converted into multiple units as opposed to someone having a roommate. And we have had some success in getting the county zoning folks involved when we find that a property has actually been divided into more than a single family home. And so the staff team will continue to work on those things. I will ask that if members in the community know of specific addresses, if you can report those to us. If we haven't opened a case yet, we will, and we'll do what we can to deal with that issue, because it does have a serious impact on the quality of life in terms of the overcrowding.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Town Manager.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My staff always has my back. to answer the council member's question from Ward 1, the hard placard permits are numbered.
That was my memory, but I thought that might have also disappeared, so I wasn't going to speak up. Thank you for that that information, Chief Morris.
Thank you, Chief, and thank your staff.
Okay, any more discussion of this at this time, or shall we have it come back around at some future work sessions after we have perhaps some offline discussions or discussions in the community? And I believe that all council members have some permit parking in their wards, perhaps not wards 5 and 6. And so perhaps you can talk to your residents about what modifications to the program they might be amenable to. I'll say it that way, because of course, all these permit parking programs, people get upset when they change. Okay. Any public comments on this discussion?
I'd like to hear what the cricket has to say.
The cricket is discussing exactly what the temperature outside the window is. So let's move on to the International Property Maintenance Code.
Mr. Chelton.
Yes, good evening again, Mayor and Council. Yes, so let's find the best place to move my screen so I don't have to try to do two things at once. Okay. Okay, that'll work. All right, yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Historically, the town has adopted the Prince George's County Housing and Property Standards Code by reference in our town code. This code at the county is a version of the International Property Maintenance Code with some of the county's amendments. The county's adoption has narrowed the scope of the International Property Maintenance Code to only reference residential buildings, and this leaves our staff with limited tools in order to address conditions at commercial and industrial properties. Recently, the county has updated to one of the more recent versions of the International Property Maintenance Code, the 2018 version. The county code is still amended to only reference residential properties. And so as the county has updated their code and as we adopted by reference, our town staff has been using this when assuring that residents are in compliance with the town code. Staff have been reviewing and studying the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code over the course of many months. During this time, the staff has spoken with the mayor and council about amendments, proposed amendments to the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code for when the town would adopt the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code itself with amendments. Here are some of the listed amendments that we had discussed in previous meetings. And, those are included in the meeting materials. And in addition to the amendments here in the meeting materials, there are a variety of housekeeping amendments that will need to take place. These amendments are administrative and include items such as designating the town department to enforce the code, naming the code, publishing the fine amounts, designating established appeal process, and bringing forward established standards in our current code. Likely, in order for residents and other property owners to better understand the code, the town will enter into a licensing agreement with the International Code Council so that the town may reproduce this model code with local amendments embedded. Yes, so if there are any questions on the adoption of the International Property Maintenance Code 2018 with amendments, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Shelton. It looks like Councilmember Sadiq has a question.
I believe you're muted, Councilmember.
The bold wording is what's being added.
That's correct. Yes. So the existing wording is that which is written without the bold, and then the bold is what we have added based on conversations with mayor and council in prior meetings.
And of course, all of that is subject to amendment. We have several new council members now, and so it may be that some of those changes may need to be revisited. Are there additional questions on this item? What is there a staff plan for bringing final version to the council, or do we need to request that a version of this come before us?
I'm not sure. I'll let John speak to this.
Well, the short answer is yes, there's a plan to bring this forward to the council. And I apologize, I had to step away for a moment. I believe Mr. Chelton shared that this is the code that is currently being enforced. In terms of the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code as adopted by the county. The county's adoption limits it to be only residential properties. So the most significant change is going to be that the code will apply to all properties in town. And did you cover that part, Mr. Chelton?
Yes,
Okay.
that and that the amendments. The local
Yes,
amendment.
and then the local amendments. So perhaps we can get copies of the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code to the full council, and along with these amendments that the previous mayor and council have offered. And then our plan, sir, because this has been going on for probably about 18 months in terms of a public discussion. We would be looking to bring something to you, I would say, in November. The last thing we have to work out is the licensing agreement with the International Code Council. As Mr. Chelton said, that would allow us to reproduce the copy written material with the embedded changes in them. If not, you have to adopt their code and have a separate addendum to it. And that makes it very difficult for residents and business owners to understand what actually applies. And the licensing fees are very reasonable for the number of reproducing the documents that we would have here.
Thank you. Councilmember Siddiq, you have a question?
Scroll down to 602, heating. A nit to pick, a 1/10 of a degree Celsius seems a little bit too tight.
We can certainly amend this to say 21 degrees Celsius.
Oh, I deal with tenths of degrees Celsius all the time.
Yeah, I don't know if my furnace is going to be that accurate.
My thermostats certainly are not that accurate. They have to pay a lot of money to get control at that level and have very good HVAC systems.
Yeah, that's an expensive thermometer.
And that is a change that we can easily make, sir. There are instructions within the code that tell the inspector how to check a room temperature, how to position themselves in a room at a certain height off the floor. So you're not checking a room on an exterior wall, things of that nature. So the staff have very specific instructions on where to check for room temperature.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I look forward to seeing this legislation come. And as you say, this is not going to be quite the change that was going to happen when we first started this process, because most of the, except for the amendments, it's what's already being enforced in town for residences. And the big change is that we will start to be able to address some of the issues with commercial properties that we've been unable to do, and except occasionally being able to ask the county zoning enforcement offices to take on some issues. Okay.
If I may.
Yeah. Yes, please, Councilmember Lingua.
Did have a question. Same neighborhood, 602, and I was wondering if you could get an explanation on the wording, because it looks like there's a difference between 602.2 and 602.3. 602 starting off being dwellings shall be provided with heating facilities capable of maintaining a room temperature of 70 degrees Fahrenheit in all habitable rooms, bathrooms, and toilet rooms based on winter outdoor design temperature for locality indicated in Appendix D. Okay. 603, every owner and operator of any building who rents, leases, or lets one or more dwelling units on terms expressed or implied to furnish heat to the occupants thereof shall supply heat during the period between September 15th to May 15th to maintain a minimum temperature of 70 degrees in all habitable rooms, bathrooms, and toilets. Slight difference there. Was wondering if you could explain that a little bit more as to why one wording or the other isn't used for both paragraphs.
Yes, so the
Please go ahead.
602.2 refers to residential building in occupancy, and 602.3 refers to other building in occupancy. So that could mean the multifamily apartment building who rents or leases, or also the retail building or industrial building.
So essentially it's striking them, it needs to be 70 degrees in there and no less.
That's right, yes.
And Councilmember Lingua, I'll point out that 602.2 is basically about the ability of the facilities to produce such a temperature.
Right.
And 602.3 says that if someone is leasing a dwelling unit and they have leased it on terms where they promise to provide heat, that they have to provide heat at that level.
Okay, as opposed to making sure that equipment is operational and capable of producing that level?
Exactly, and it's basically regulating the rental market a little bit and saying if you're renting a house, if you're renting an apartment to someone and you say
you're renting a basement apartment, that basement apartment needs to be at 70 degrees.
If you say I'm going to cover heat for you, and in the case of a basement apartment, then it's likely that would be the case.
And it's
Okay.
capable of maintaining the temperature. And yes.
Okay, we see there you go, using capable of maintaining it versus no, that room's got to be at 70 degrees in the winter time.
And that's what 602.3 says,
Okay,
that you shall supply the heat.
okay. Well, I heard capable sneaking in there again, so that's why I was just wanting to make it understand I knew what was going on here. Great, thank you.
Any additional questions, comments, thoughts from any members of the public or the council on this item? Okay, item 7 is the minutes. I hope that everyone will carefully review them and perhaps find an occasional missing comma, but Director Barnes is very good at producing high quality minutes and providing them, so it's very difficult to find something that's incorrect in them. I have found in my careful perusing of them. But if so, please contact Director Barnes and let her know about the issue. Or contact the town manager and he can relay that on. Let's move on to new business. There is one specific item under new business, which is the Prince George's County Municipal Association Legislative Request Survey. And I guess I can go ahead and jump in on this. There are two municipal associations that we are members of. There is the Maryland Municipal League, which is a statewide organization of municipalities. And then underneath the umbrella of the Maryland Municipal League, there's the Prince George's County Municipal Association, which is a subsidiary, an affiliate organization. And both the Maryland Municipal League and the Prince George's County Municipal Association either comment or request legislation or request changes to legislation. And so this is a request from PGCMA to inviting us to submit legislative requests. And so in past years, we have introduced items here. I've also introduced or asked our state delegation to take on some legislative issues directly. And so this is just a request that came into the town, and we're supposed to complete the survey by Friday, October 1st. And so we can't really act on it as a council, but we can individually go in and they will probably track who is coming from municipalities. So we'll have a de facto vote if a bunch of people want to chime in on various issues. So this is more just an item of attention, unless people want to discuss some issues, and in which case we could try to coordinate a little bit. Any thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Please.
I think kind of the question we can figure out tonight is, do we want to be a unified voice on this topic, or what? Or do we want to have 7 different, or I'm sure staff would want to weigh in on this too. So are we going in as like X number of different opinions, or do we want to go in with a unified voice or a consistent list of priorities?
So do you have some topics to suggest, Councilmember Lincoln?
Well, from what I looked at the survey, and was trying to, let me see if I can pull it up. There it is. Looking for the link, sorry. I kind of saw it as being somewhat broad, and I think for me, it would be about trying to work on those items that allow municipalities to coordinate more effectively with each other. That's one ability to be leeway to be able to do that. I don't think I would be putting up anything that would be specific to us as a municipality. I would think if we're going to be putting in any suggesting any type of legislation, it would be something that all municipalities would be able to benefit from. And I know being able to coordinate, finding ways that through legislation from the state and or county that could make it easier or facilitate such coordination, so that neighboring municipalities can be working together, be it on grants, be it on bonds or whatever, or setting up structures where they're going to be having shared revenue going in, different from, say, like when contributing to, like, say, a 501c3, that they would be able to.
Well,
I totally agree.
Do you have a specific
Well, I know one of the
direction
things
that you'd like to
one
take
of the
this
things that
evening?
we've talked about before is stormwater management. This is, I know it's we're looking at doing projects and funding what we can in our area. I don't know what Edmonston's doing. I'm not really sure exactly what College Park is doing or University Park, and these are all municipalities that, or Hyattsville, and these are municipalities that border us. Mainly because right now it's not really, there's not a framework set up where municipalities can work together and it's to the point of being able to pool resources on projects that would benefit both by their participation, or even if it's
Well, that's
over by one.
That's certainly true of the ARPA funding, that we have to step gingerly in spending money that is outside of our corporate boundaries.
Right.
But you know, that's federal money, and I don't believe that this question has to do with federal legislation. And you know, in the absence of that, if we wanted to enter into a cooperative stormwater management project with University Park, there's nothing that's preventing us from doing that except our, you know, limited funds and a decision on how to spend them. And of course, stormwater projects can be extraordinarily expensive, and
right.
so that's an issue. So I'll say in previous years, PGCMA has adopted priorities that, as you say, are somewhat broad, and one of them that's been adopted fairly uniformly over the last few years is planning for and mitigating the effects of climate change, and so that's definitely something that we could support, or we could say that there are higher priorities than that. Those are some options that we have. But the timing of this particular survey and its due date makes it difficult for us to act as a unit unless we wanted to bring up the survey right now and go right through it. And that's a possibility, and we could provide we could informally decide to support certain items or not. I haven't visited the survey, and so we should, I don't know how involved it is. Have you looked at it, Councilmember? Mr. Town Manager, please speak.
Yes, sir. In looking at the survey, it's pretty brief. There's 10 questions or 10 blanks, including name of municipality and the contact person, contact number. And what they really want to get at is to describe a problem or situation the request is intended to address, describe how the requested legislation would remedy that problem, and then a little bit of background type things. If it pleases the council, the date at the top, it says, please complete by Friday, the 1st. If it pleases the council, would you want us to reach out to PGCMA and see if we could reply to this by next Tuesday? And because it just, you know, I'm sure they're trying to get information to collate it and put something together. But it would seem that a 2 business day extension may be granted to give council members an opportunity to go through this and discuss it next week.
That sounds like a fantastic idea, Mr. Town Manager. And so why don't we request that? I agree, having attended the last several PGCMA meetings, I know the structure of their lobbying effort. And so I believe that a few day delay is not going to derail us, but probably giving them advance notice of it would help our request to be heard when it does come in.
And I meet with the staff leadership team tomorrow, sir, and we'll talk about it and see if we can come up with a list for your all's consideration. We can email that out to you.
That is fantastic.
And that's a recommendation from Director Barnes.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. Does that sound acceptable to members of the council? I
That
saw
would work
see
for me.
hear a yes and saw 2 thumbs up, one virtual and one real. And so I think we can go with that plan. Are there other items of new business from members of the council? Hearing nothing except the cricket that's apparently inside my my
Litter
room
cricket.
because I closed the windows and the cricket is still quite loud, so I think it's inside somewhere. But anyway, I received an email from Mayor James from, where's Mayor James from?
Bladensburg?
Bladensburg, thank you. I was going down Kenilworth and naming all the municipalities, and I hadn't quite gotten down there. So thank you. From Bladensburg about a program to reduce street violence. And the program is called Our Streets, Our Future. And I'm going to forward this message to everyone's email inbox, and you can review the material in the program, and we can perhaps discuss it next week if we want to get involved. And so that's just a heads up. I presume that Councilmember Smith will have a town email address shortly. Is that correct?
I believe
I
he
currently
does.
have one thanks to Ms. Barnes.
Okay, well, I hadn't seen any mail going to it yet, so I'll find out what that is from Director Barnes and send that to everyone later this evening. Okay, any other items of new business? Any items of unfinished business? Okay, it's 9:18 p.m. and I'm gonna go try to find some dinner now, and I hope everyone has a pleasant evening and enjoys the weather. And I'm gonna try to find that cricket, but not to have it for dinner. So see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice night.
Have a nice night.
And see you tomorrow evening.
Thank you for the reminder.
See you all tomorrow. Don't forget.
Yes,
I just
definitely.
almost did. I was going to say see you next week, but I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.